Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the latest episode. It's the Keane and Judah Show. I'm your host, Nathan Judah, delighted to be joined by the Oasis follower himself, the groupie that is Mr. Liam Keane. Liam, a question to you. Would you rather on Saturday evening be watching Oasis literally within a stone's throw of Noel and Liam, or watching Wolves lose 4-0 to Manchester City?
Yeah, it's a real tough one. It's a difficult one to weigh up. Look, I mean, if Wolves had managed to get a famous result, maybe I'd have had a different answer. But I think I probably chose a good one to miss on this occasion. Great for the show as well, isn't it?
Pardon? Yeah, it's great for the show. I mean, stay tuned. It's going to be great analysis, superb. No, I mean, obviously you've had a chance to watch it back, and get a little bit of the feedback and the analysis from the weekend. Look, not the best way to start, of course, but Wolves don't like to do things easy, do they? So let's start from the bottom of the table. Let's work our way up. That's how we do it. So we can only be excited with the only way is up, so to speak. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about 3 up, 3 down, 3 players that impressed, or situations that impressed, and 3 things that need work. Let's start on the way up, and let's talk about a guy who was much maligned, let's be honest, but we said to him, we were there in Spain, we were there in Portugal, we said how he impressed, we said that he started almost every game, if not every game, of pre-season. That is Mr. Keane Hoover, who actually I thought came out of the game with a lot of credibility compared to others, especially in that defence. Worked well down that right-hand side, was an attacking threat when Wolves went forward. Of course, that was few and far between, as you were against Manchester City. But I thought he provided an outlet. I thought his distribution was good. And overall, for someone who, as we know, there's been a development today and is probably going to be back up. But Vitor Pereira has already insisted that he's going to be here this season. He is going to be part of the squad. And I think fair play, because there's always someone who comes out of pre-season, I think, who we don't expect to shine. And he's one of those players. And I think he's thoroughly deserved to stay at this football club and push for a starting slot regularly.
Yeah, as you said, there's always a surprise, isn't there, in pre-season? And Keane Hoover has been the surprise package for this year. In a pre-season that didn't really offer a lot, did it? So let's try and take the positives from that. Look, he needs work, of course. You know, there were moments in pre-season where his crossing wasn't particularly great. He got into some really good positions and needed to improve. But I'm pleased that he was able to show a bit against City, because look, we said this before the City game. You could have offered us fantastic odds on Keane Hoover starting against Man City a few months ago, and we would never have taken it. So for him to be there, it was a major surprise, and for him to take that opportunity to some extent in the context and circumstance of a damaging defeat is great for him personally, and great that Vitor Pereira is backing him, or publicly backing him, to say, look, he's going to stick around, and I like him. He's going to be with us this season. Yeah, and as you say, Wolves needed to bring another player in. Look, Nelson Semedo's gone. They needed someone in, firstly, to compete with Keane Hoover, but perhaps start ahead of him, which is probably only fair and right for this team going forward. That player looks like, if he is going to start ahead of Hoover, is the player that's just arrived in Jackson Tachua. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I was going to say, I was going to let you to pronounce. I had no interest in pronouncing his surname, let alone spell it or write it very quickly in a tweet.
Yes,
it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, you've got previous for a couple of those spelling errors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I apologise to Jackson if I am butchering his surname, but I believe that's how you pronounce it. Look, same age as Hoover, comes in with a decent bit of experience, having played in Italy and played regularly, supposedly very fast, having won the award last season for the fastest player in the Serie A, the Italian top flight. Around 36 kilometres an hour, he managed to clock in, which is a little bit slower than me and you, but not too bad. But look, if they can bring someone in that's going to offer a bit of competition, perhaps, as I say, to be a starter, because if Hoover's ready for that, I'm not quite sure. But they needed to bring that in that area. So really important signing. Whether either of them are an improvement or as good as Nelson Semedo remains to be seen. If they're an adequate replacement or not is difficult to say. But it's a positive step that they're able to bring a player in, and that Hoover has had a decent enough start to the season.
Correct. That's the first up then, Keane Hoover, and of course, supplemented now by Jackson.
Tachua.
Tachua.
There you go. You did it right.
From the right, let's move over to the left, and Premier League debut, of course, for David Muller-Wolf. And yeah, I've got him on the down list, unfortunately. And look, it's difficult because Premier League debut, and when you just come in, you had 45 minutes against Celta Vigo. You're playing your second game, so maybe it's a little bit harsh to be on the down list. But at the same time, I thought in the first 45 minutes we saw him 2 weekends ago, of course, when we were there for the Celta Vigo game. It was okay. I don't think Wolves had more of the ball against Celta Vigo. I don't think that Wolf really utilised that particularly well. Of course, he's been brought in because he's more defensively sound. I think we'll see that. And I think overall, his defensive display against Manchester City was okay. I think he'll be disappointed with the first goal, maybe his positioning there. But overall, it was okay. But in terms of the formation, I think that Vitor Pereira plays, and you have these three centre backs, Liam. It's inviting your wing backs to go forward, and when you see someone like Ryan Ait-Nouri, who of course was against them on Saturday, and you miss that attacking intent, and yeah, Ait-Nouri of course had his defensive issues at Wolves, but and I think Wolves will be more solid than that. But at the same time, with those three centre backs, you need those wing backs to go forward. You need them on the overlap. You need to put crosses in, and I do feel that even though they will have more of the ball, Wolves, going forward, especially in some of the games coming up. I didn't really see that from Muller Wolf. I didn't see him getting to the byline. I didn't see him crossing. I think when he did go into the opposition half of the pitch, he was almost turning back and passing behind him. And that's all well and good for keeping possession, and that's needed some of the time. But you just want him to take that next step, take a bit of a risk, get a give and go, especially when you're losing the game, you've got to score goals. So it'll be interesting, I think, as soon as Bournemouth, really, because Hugo Bueno comes on, Liam, and does very, very well, impressed, got to the byline, put a couple of decent crosses in. All of a sudden, with Arias and Lopez on there, they looked a lot more dangerous. So whether that's a change or not straight away, I'm not too sure. However, I don't think Wolf is going to get 5 or 6 or 7 games to bed in here, starting week in, week out. I think he's got a battle on his hands from game week 2.
Yeah, it's not just the formation that Wolves play with that 5-2-3 or 3-5.
3-4-3.
Yeah, all over the place. However you want to call it.
Tell you what, Wolves need 4-7-2 at times. Yeah, still would have got beat on Saturday.
It's not just the formation; it's the way in which Wolves play in that system. And under Vitor Pereira, he said it publicly himself several times. He needs those wing backs to be more like wingers for the most part. Look, against City, of course, that's slightly different. They're going to have defensive responsibilities, and they will do in plenty of games this season as well. But going forward, they need to bring that width and that attacking intent, because the two number 10s either side of the striker are very narrow and play more as attacking midfielders, really, rather than wide players. And that's where you need that width. And that's where it's almost a catch-22 for Wolf, because he's played in the back four previously. He's taller, he's more physical, he's better defensively than Ryan Ait-Nouri was. He isn't the same dynamic, forward-thinking, attacking player that Ryan Ait-Nouri is or was in a Wolves shirt. So it's almost difficult of us to compare him to Ait-Nouri from an attacking point of view. But at the same time, in the system that Wolves play and the way that Vitor wants to play, you almost expect to need that of Wolf. So what's the correct answer here? The correct answer is he's probably not really going to be that kind of player in a Wolves shirt, or at least from what we've seen so far. But defensively will be quite solid. But is that really going to fit what Wolves need at the moment? In certain games, yes, against a City, against some of the other bigger clubs, there'll be lots of reasons why Wolf would be a fantastic addition and person to play on that left wing back position. But with other more attacking minded players that can play in that position in the squad, you start to wonder against certain opposition whether Wolf would be the right option or not going forward. And for that to be the discussion around a player that Wolves have only just recently signed for £10 million does become a little bit of an issue for the club.
Yeah, I do see some similarities in the wing-back positions, Liam. And look, I think maybe an issue for previous seasons is that Nelson Semedo and Wright Noe had no competition, really, did they? They were starting if they were fit, they were starting every single week. So maybe with Tachua coming in with Wolf and Bueno on that left-hand side, Rodrigo Gomez, of course, can play on either side as well. There is maybe more of a competition this season where you've got 2 to 3 players who will be vying for a starting position every single week, and maybe they will push each other, and Wolves will benefit from it.
Yeah, which I would like to think is going to be the case. I mean, we'll come on to it a little bit later in the show. There may be some movement, obviously, on that left side with one of those individuals potentially. I hope there isn't, but there is a potential for that. But I would like that, because this, Wolves too often in seasons have allowed that competition to be eroded by allowing players to move on. Sometimes you've got to be a little bit ruthless and say, no, we need the help, we need the backup, we need the players here, and you keep certain players with the squad to ensure that Vitor Pereira has adequate depth going forward. I think the options that Wolves have got, they've got different styles, different kind of players, and different options at both sides now, which hopefully will prove a benefit moving forward. Allowing any of them to leave now it means that potentially you're slightly short again. And having just completed those positions, I don't want Wolves to go back to a position where they are desperately crying out for signing.
Hoover on the way up, Wolf on the way down. On the way up again is Andre. I could have named João Gomez, could have named Andre. I mean, just still quality. You know, middle of the pitch. Maybe a dicey first 5 minutes of the game, I think, as City kind of dominated those first 5-10 minutes, those open exchanges. But yeah, just tireless. João Gomez, maybe I didn't put in this because even though he gave the first goal, the second goal I think Agbadou gave away, it was towards João Gomez, kind of lost possession, but it was a poor pass anyway. But in terms of Andre, like, just doesn't stop running, doesn't stop tackling. Many times he beat the Manchester City players to the ball. He reads the game so well. And look, you know, in terms of these two, it's more about these two. We've got to stay fit and they've got to stay disciplined, I think, this season, because you look at what Wolves have got at this moment in time, Liam, in terms of a backup, and they haven't really got anyone. You know, I would say that if they lost their place now, or if they were suspended, or they missed a game through injury, maybe Marshall Manetzi would come in there. But you know, they've let Tommy Doyle go to Birmingham City on loan. Boubacar Traore is no longer there as well. So in terms of a central midfielder, they need a backup. They need someone to come in and help them. They're not going to be pushing them, are they? But you've got two central Brazilian starting midfielders. I mean, that it is what it is. But they are just integral to this side and integral to this season. And let's be honest, integral to Wolves staying up in the division.
Yeah, without a doubt. Both of them fantastic players, and both for different reasons, really. Andre as a 6, João Gomez as more of an 8, both bringing different attributes and some similar ones with, you know, plenty of running, putting the hard yards in, fantastic ball retention, great at tackling, all of these different things that they both have. And then obviously, of course, a few different attributes as well. I think the next in line for a midfield position, Manetzi's a good option, or a good shout from you rather. But I think probably Bellegarde would be next in there. I would hazard a guess. But what that does prove and show, as you've articulated there already, is that Wolves desperately need a centre midfield signing. Those two are so good that, and I wrote about this, you know, a couple of months ago now in pre-season, that they're so good and they're going to start every week because of how good they are. But that's difficult for Wolves to bring any player in that position, because they need to bring someone in who's good enough to replace one of them. And I'll come on to which one needs, you know, potentially replacing, or an option to replace it in a moment. But someone who can come in and potentially replace them and be good enough to fit into the team, but also someone who doesn't necessarily mind being back up for the time being while those two are fit and firing and in the team. They're so integral to how Wolves play and how Wolves are going to play going forward. As you say as well, any of them, either of them, getting an injury or suspension at the moment would be a bit of a disaster. Particularly with Andre, and this is where I'm coming on to this second point. There's no real replacement for Andre in this team. Now, Bellegarde or Manetzi can go and play as an 8 and replace João Gomez. Is it an absolute ideal scenario? Of course not, but Wolves could do that and get through some games, even though João Gomez is fantastic. But if Andre is out for any reason, there's no real number 6 that can come in there and play there. And that's the area the Wolves need to bring a centre midfielder in, because they lose a lot of balance if Andre's out of this team.
Yeah, good shout. That's Andre on the way up. On the way down, what are we doing? Emmanuel Agbadou. I'm gonna start crying now. It was a frog in my throat. It was actually the blueberry I was having for my protein shake. But you know, I was almost in tears watching him on Saturday, because we've said time and time again, you know, I don't want to keep on going on about it, but we have said, Liam, we were covering pre-season. We've been there in Portugal, we've been there in Spain. We've seen the games at home against Stoke, against Lens, against Celta Vigo in this country, and time again, we have said that Emmanuel Agbadou was just not himself. He was not, whether it was too casual, whether it was lack of concentration, whether it's fitness, I'm not too sure, but Emmanuel Agbadou does not seem himself. And we kind of gave him a pass, because pre-season's pre-season, and sometimes I can understand people not going at 100%. You don't want your players to go to 100%. You want to build them up ready for that Manchester City game. So we didn't think of it as too concerning, but I think it was important for us to mention. And then you go into Manchester City, and yes, when you've got Erling Haaland that you're marking, it's going to be a difficult game. But I would say that 3 of those 4 goals that Wolves conceded on that afternoon had something to do with Emmanuel Agbadou, or he will be disappointed with his role in there, especially the one he gave away with a terrible pass to João Gomez, which led to Manchester City scoring. I believe it was the second goal. But the first goal, the second goal, and I believe the fourth goal as well, Not great news for him. He doesn't seem to be himself at this moment in time. I hope he can snap out of it. And look, we could quite easily see a great Emmanuel Agbadou and the man mountain that we know that he is against Bournemouth on Saturday. And we'll need to see that. But you talk about that spine of the team, Liam, and you talk about Jose Sarr, Manuel Agbadou, your two central midfielders and Jurgen Strand-Larsen. If one of your spine has got a kink in it, if there's a little bit of a weak vertebrae in there, you are bang in trouble. And at this moment in time, Agbadou is way below the standards that he set himself last season.
Yeah, spot on. The Man City performance from Agbadou would be less of a concern if he'd had a brilliant pre-season, because it's Man City. You're going to concede a lot of chances. You're playing against probably the best striker in the world and certainly one of the most physical strikers in the league. Who's going to be really difficult to play against. He's got fantastic movement, big, strong, fast, and fantastic finisher. So, of course, it's going to be difficult. Of course, you're going to have bad moments in a game like that as a defender. But the moments that we've spotted and the performance that we've seen is so similar to the poor performances and very casual performances that we saw in pre-season that you have to put it all together and think that that's a major concern. And particularly with that second goal, as you mentioned, the pass out to João Gomez, which is a very simple pass, a pass he probably shouldn't make in the first place anyway with the players that are around João Gomez. And he makes such a mess of it. And it's so similar to a lot of the passes we saw from him in pre-season that there's something that's just not quite right at the moment. I still have confidence they'll come back and be the kind of player that we've seen before, because he was so good last season. Of course, he had the occasional off game as well, but he was so good last season. And I'm hoping against, no disrespect, but lesser teams in comparison to Man City, Bournemouth and Everton coming up, that we'll see him back to his best, or at least a lot closer to his best. And Wolves are going to desperately need him because he's so important to this team, and that spine that you've mentioned. Without him fit and firing, you lose a massive bonus from what this team has to offer, which at the moment isn't offering a lot. And Agbadou is a big part of getting Wolves out of trouble.
Let's go on the way up then. So we've got Hoover, Andre, and last person on the way up. I've just said collectively here the substitutes because there was a quadruple substitution by Vitor Pereira, and too late. Wolves were 3-0 down at the time. But two players I think will be disappointed to miss out from a starting lineup. Well, everybody's obviously disappointed to miss out, but two in particular in John Arias and Fer Lopez. He went for a little bit of a safer option, I think, knowing that Manchester City would have the majority of the ball. You can understand why Vitor Pereira went down that line. But I think as soon as Lopez, Arias came on along with Hugo Bueno and Rodrigo Gomez, instantly they were a lot better. They're a lot better attacking. They look threatening. Like, look, it's 70 minutes. You've got fresh legs on. When you've got 4 lots of fresh legs in a 70-minute game, you expect there to be some impetus because, the pace is slowing down, etc. So there was that injection of pace. But I just think that overall, Wolves looked more threatening. They had more options. They weren't as predictable. And I think especially for Arias and for Lopez as well, moving around, Lopez likes to come back, go and get the ball. And I just felt that City struggled to pick them up. And it's a good sign. And you look at Bellegarde, who got that chance, and Menezzi, and I just wonder whether when we go to Bournemouth, where Wolves should have more of the ball, they should have more chances in this game, whether we see an immediate double switch or triple switch. We've talked about Wolf and Bueno potentially. I think Wolf will probably get another game. But definitely in terms of the number 10, so to speak, in Arias and Lopez, I wouldn't be shocked if both of those two find themselves in the starting lineup going into the game at the Vitality.
Yeah, part of me does think that Menezzi keeps his place, but we'll come on to that in the podcast later in the week, but in a bit more detail. But yeah, I do wonder whether that would be the case. He did play 90 minutes, didn't he, against City as well, and I think Vitor's relying a bit on him at the moment. In hindsight, I suppose I could sort of understand the Menezzi and Bellegarde decision. I thought it would be Arias and Menezzi rather than Bellegarde, but it wasn't also a major shock really to see those two. And you did have a bit of impact from the bench, which is a positive thing moving forward. For me, Arias, I think one needs to start going forward. I think it'll probably be him and Menezzi against Bournemouth. But Fer Lopez showed lots of things in pre-season. I think with a little bit of time as well, as a young man coming to the Premier League, we'll see more from him going forward. They need additions in those forward areas as well. That's something they're working on at the moment. But to have a bit of that impact from the bench, yes, is a positive. The negative, of course, is that it was far too late. By the time they came on, the game had already gone and Wolves were destined to lose it. That's where they have to improve moving forward. And I'm hoping against Bournemouth we can see a far better start and sort of team performance, really.
Yep, substitutes on the way up as an impact. On the way down to final person this week, and that's Jose Sarr. Again, I don't think Jose Sarr, on the game, apart from conceding 4 goals, of course, had a disaster of a game or a disaster performance, or was completely at fault for one of the goals conceded. But there were a couple of goals there that I think he'll be disappointed didn't get more of a hand on, or at least have a save. And we all know that Jose Sarr has got his faults, but in terms of a shot stopper, I think he's still one of the better keepers in the Premier League. Distribution, etc. You're always going to have a couple of heart and mouth moments with Jose Sarr, but in terms of shot stopping, I think he's pretty sound. And when he looks back at that game and looks back at his movement, maybe looks back at his positioning, I think he'll be a little bit disappointed. Look, he's named in that leadership group. I don't think Jose Sarr is going to be replaced. I don't think a new keeper's coming in as a new number 1 this season. We said at the start of the season that it was something that Wolves would look at, but it wasn't a priority. And look, they've still got a lot of priorities in a lot of different areas. I think with him being named in this leadership group, I think that Jose will definitely be at Wolves going forward. And we'll see him, of course, in goal against Bournemouth this weekend coming up. But yeah, in terms of his own performance, I think he'll be disappointed, Liam. And look, Wolves are going to concede some goals this season, and they're going to need the keeper to be at the very, very best. And I think from Sarr's point of view, he'll look back, he'll work with his goalkeeping coach, he'll look back at the video footage and be a little bit disappointed with his performance on the afternoon.
Yeah, Jose Sarr has his faults, of course he does. But what he is very good at is a shot stopper, and that's why it'll be so disappointing, because there were moments, a couple of the goals in particular, I think Haaland's second one in particular as well, where I think he needs to do better with it.
Yeah.
And that's the disappointing thing. I don't think it's necessarily concerning or worrying. I think it's more disappointing rather than anything. On a day when it didn't really come together for Wolves, and we know how bad pre-season has been in context, in comparison, for Sarr to not be at his best as well, and maybe not cover himself in glory for a couple of those moments, is disappointing. I do think he'll be number 1 going forward. I don't think he'll have any major concerns. We're going to have mistakes from him. We're going to have heart-in-mouth moments, as you say. But that's who he is as a goalkeeper. He'll also pull off some very good saves as well. It was never a priority for Wolves to replace him, but it was a position they were considering this summer. As you can tell, we're going late into the window, and they've still got at least 2 or 3 positions to bring some players in. So hence why it was not a priority in a summer where we're probably going to see quite a few incomings as well as a few outgoings. But they've now moved Tom King on. The goalkeeper department's moved around a little bit, and I think Jose Sarr will be here moving forward. We just need to see better from him, really. He's an experienced guy who, yes, he isn't necessarily the reason Wolves lost the game, but I think he can do a lot better than he has done. And that's going to be the story of the season at times for him, because he is a little bit erratic, but he will pull you out of issues and bad moments at times as well. So provided he can have the players in front of him, like Agbadou, that are instilling the confidence and making life a bit easier for him as well, I don't think he'll be a major issue this season.
That's 3 down against Manchester City. On the way up, Kian, Hoover, Andre, and the substitutes. On the way down, Wolf, Agbadou, and Jose Sarr. We'll see you all next week, where we'll be looking back at hopefully the win against Bournemouth on Saturday. From me, from Kino, have a great rest of the week. Take care. Bye-bye.